Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Helen Jones.
Number 1, sir.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think, as the response from the whole House showed, we all do indeed welcome the Speaker of the Burmese Parliament and his colleagues to see our deliberations today. I'm also sure that the whole House will join me in sending our thoughts to the police officer who was shot in Belfast over the weekend and to his friends and family. PSNI do a superb job in keeping us safe and secure, and they have our fullest support. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today. And later this week, I will travel to the United States for talks with President Trump.
Joan.
May I join the Prime Minister in sending good wishes to the police officer who was shot in Belfast. They are the best drivers of social mobility. 99% are rated good or outstanding, and 65% of their places are in the most deprived areas of this country. So why is the Prime Minister introducing cuts that threaten the very existence of maintained nursery schools? Is it not true that when it comes to social mobility, her actions speak far louder than her words?
Prime Minister.
I want to ensure, and this government wants to ensure, that we see good quality of education at every age and at every stage for children in this country. That is why we are looking at improving the number of good school places. But she talks about my record speaking louder than words. Can I just point out to the Honourable Lady that I was very proud, as chairman of an education authority in London in the 1990s, to introduce nursery school places for every 3- and 4-year-old whose parent wanted them.
The Prime Minister laid out a clear and bold plan for Brexit in her speech last week. Honourable members quite rightly want an opportunity to scrutinise that plan. Does the Prime Minister agree that the best way of facilitating that scrutiny would be a government white paper laying out our vision for a global Britain based on free trade in goods and services that will be to the benefit of us and other European countries?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend raises the question of parliamentary scrutiny. I have been clear, as have senior ministers, that we will ensure that Parliament has every opportunity to provide that scrutiny on this issue as we go through this process. But I recognise I set out that bold plan for a global Britain last week, and I recognise there is an appetite in this House to see that plan set out in a white paper. My honourable friend's question, the question from my honourable friend, the member from Broxtowe, last week, in the same vein, and I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published in this House.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I join the Prime Minister in condolences in expressing condolences, I'm sure, of the whole House to the family of the police officer who lost his life over the weekend in Northern Ireland. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has wasted 80 days between the time of the original judgment and the appeal, and has now finally admitted today, after pressure from all sides, that there's going to be a white paper. Could we know when this white paper is going to be available to us? And why it's taken so long to get it?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he asked for debates. I was very clear there would always be debates in this House, and there have been and will continue to be. He asked for votes. There have been votes in this House. The House voted overwhelmingly for the government to trigger Article 50 before the end of March this year. He asked for a plan. I set out, as my honourable friend for Croydon South said, a clear plan for a bold future for Britain. He and others asked for a white paper. I've been clear there will be a white paper. But what I'm also clear about is that the right honourable gentleman always asks about process, about the means to the end. I and this government are focusing on the outcomes. We're focusing on a truly global Britain building a stronger future for this country, the right deal for Britain and Britain out of the European Union.
Mr. Speaker, my question wasn't complicated. It just asked when the white paper will come out. And will it be published before or at the same time as the bill that is apparently about to be published? Mr. Speaker, last week I asked the Prime Minister repeatedly to clarify whether her government is prepared to pay to secure tariff-free access to the single European market. She repeatedly refused to answer the question. So I'll ask her again. Is her government ruling out paying a fee for tariff-free access to the single market or the bespoke customs union that she outlined also in her speech?
Prime Minister.
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman, in his reference to the timing issue, these are actually two separate issues. The House has overwhelmingly voted that Article 50 should be triggered before the end of March 2017. Following the Supreme Court judgment, a bill will be provided for this House and there will be the proper debates in this chamber and in another place on that bill. There is then the separate question of actually publishing the plan that I have set out, a bold vision for Britain for the future. I will do that in a white paper, and the right honourable gentleman knows that one of our objectives is the best possible free trade arrangement with the European Union, and that's what we'll be out there negotiating for.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, some of this is very worrying to many people in this House, but more importantly, it's worrying to many others. For example, the chief executive of Nissan was given assurances by her business secretary about future trade arrangements with Europe, but now says they will have to re-evaluate the situation about their investments in Britain. The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, is threatening the EU that unless they give in to her demands, she will turn Britain into a bargain basement tax haven off the coast of Europe. Well, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House are very well aware of the consequences that would have. The damage it would do to jobs and living standards and our public services. Is she now going to rule out the bargain basement threat that was in her speech at Lancaster House?
Prime Minister.
I expect us to get a good deal for trading relationships with the European Union. But what I'm also clear about is that this government will not sign up to a bad deal for the United Kingdom. And as to the threats that the right honourable gentleman claims about what might happen, and he often talks about this, he uses those phrases, he talks about workers' rights. Perhaps he should listen to his former colleague in this House, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who has today said, to give credit to the government, I don't think they want to weaken workers' rights, and goes on to say, I've seen no evidence from the conversations I've had with senior members of the government that that's their aspiration or their intention or something they want to do, which is good. As usual with Labour, the right hand's not talking to the far left.
Mr. Speaker, the evidence of what the Tory party and this government really thinks about workers' rights was there for all to see yesterday. A private member's bill under the 10-minute rule bill by a Tory MP to tear up parts of the International Labour Organisation Convention, talking down my friend the member for Grimsby's bill to protect European workers' rights that have been obtained in this country. That is the real agenda of the Tory party. Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister is doing is petulantly aiming a threat at our public services with her threats about a bargain basement Britain. Is her priority our struggling NHS, those denied social care, children having their school funding cut, or is it once again further cuts in big business taxation to make the rich even better off?
Prime Minister.
I would simply remind the right honourable gentleman on the issue of workers' rights that I have been very clear that this government will protect workers' rights. Indeed, we have a review of modern employment law to ensure that employment legislation is keeping up with the modern labour market. One of the objectives I set out in my plan for our negotiating objectives was to protect workers' rights. But he talks about threats to public services. I'll tell him what the threat to public services would be. It would be a Labour government borrowing 500 billion extra pounds. That would destroy our economy and mean no funding for our public services.
Jeremy Corbyn!
The threat to workers' rights, Mr. Speaker, is there every day. 6 million earning less than the living wage. Many people, nearly 1 million, on 0 hours contracts with no protection being offered by this government. What they're doing is offering once again the bargain basement alternative. Will the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, also take this opportunity today to congratulate the 100,000 people who marched in Britain last weekend to highlight women's rights after President Trump's inauguration and express their concerns about his misogyny? Because many have concerns, Mr. Speaker, that in her forthcoming meeting with President Trump, she will be prepared to offer up for sacrifice the opportunity of American companies to come in and take over parts of our NHS or our public services. Will she assure the House that in any trade deal, none of those things will be offered up as a bargaining chip?
Prime Minister!
Again, I would point out to the right honourable gentleman that it is this government that has introduced the national living wage. And this government that has actually made changes to 0 hour contracts. But on the issue of my visit to the United States of America, on the issue of my visit to the United States of America, I'm pleased that I am able to meet President Trump so early in his administration. That is a sign of the strength of the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States of America, a special relationship on which he and I intend to build. But can I also say to the Leader of the Opposition, I am not afraid to speak frankly to a President of the United States. I am able to do that because we have that special relationship, a special relationship that he would never have with the United States.
Mr. Speaker, we would never allow Britain to be sold off on the cheap. How confident is she of getting a good deal for global Britain from a president who wants to put America first, buy American, and build a wall between his country and Mexico? Article 50 wasn't about a court judgment against this government. What it signified was the bad judgment of this government. The bad judgment of prioritising corporate tax cuts over investment in national health and social care. The bad judgment of threatening European partners whilst offering a blank cheque to President Trump. The bad judgment of wanting to turn Britain into a bargain basement tax haven. So will she offer some clarity and some certainty and withdraw the threats to destroy the social structure of this country by turning us into the bargain basement she clearly threatens?
Prime Minister!
We will be out around the world with the EU, America and other countries negotiating good free trade deals for this country that will bring prosperity to this country. But the right honourable gentleman wants to talk about Brexit. I have to say to him, he's the leader of the party. He can't even agree with his shadow chancellor about Brexit. The shadow chancellor can't agree with the shadow Brexit secretary. The shadow Brexit secretary disagrees with the shadow home secretary. And the shadow home secretary has to ring up the leader and tell him to change his mind. He talks about us standing up for Britain. They can't speak for themselves. They'll never speak for Britain.
Debates that shape the nation, now in your language.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The European Medicines Agency provides a single drug licensing system for 500 million people and results in the UK having drugs licensed 6 to 12 months ahead of countries like Canada and Australia. Yesterday, the Health Secretary stated that the UK will not be in the EMA. So can the Prime Minister confirm this and explain how she'll prevent delayed drug access for UK patients?
Minister.
There are a number of organisations that we are part of as members of the European Union, and as part of the work that we are doing to look at the United Kingdom in the future when we've left the European Union, we look at the arrangements that we can put in place in relation to those issues. We want to ensure that we continue to have the pharmaceutical industry in this country is a very important part of our economy, as are the ability of people to access these new drugs. And I can assure the Honourable Lady that we are looking seriously at this and will ensure we've got the arrangements that we need.
Rebecca Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Cake in my constituency of Taunton Dean, a £30 million turnover company, has recently been bought by a French company called Mademoiselle Desserts. They trade across Europe at the Ministry of Cake and into China. Does this not demonstrate, Prime Minister, and would you agree with me, that it demonstrates confidence in our economy and that a European company is bought into it? It demonstrates that we can unlock global trade, and it demonstrates that the South West is a terrific place to do business.
Prime Minister.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. I think the investment that she has referred to, the French company, into a company in her constituency, shows the confidence that people have in our economy for the future. It shows the fundamental strengths of our economy, and it also shows, as she says, that we can unlock global trade. And of course, the South West is a very good place to do business.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Robert Burns once wrote, "Whatever damages society or any least part of it, that is my measure of iniquity." Would the Prime Minister agree that that description applies perfectly to the detention fast-track system recently found to be illegal by British courts, under which 10,000 asylum seekers were denied a fair trial, and some of whom were probably illegally deported to death and torture?
Prime Minister.
I say to the honourable gentleman, the issue of the detained fast-track system in the asylum system is one that obviously I looked at when I was Home Secretary, and we did make a number of changes to the way we operated the detained fast-track. But it's built on a very simple principle, which is that if there is somebody whose case for asylum is such that they are almost certain to be refused that asylum, then we want to ensure that they can be removed from the country as quickly as possible, hence the detained fast track.
Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is currently an offence to assault a police officer, an immigration officer or a prison officer, but it is not a specific offence to assault an NHS worker, whether they're a doctor, a nurse or a paramedic. Does my Prime Minister agree with me we should consider extending a specific offence to these people to make it absolutely clear that the public will not tolerate violence towards our hard-working members of the NHS?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend raises an important point. Of course, we condemn assaults on anybody and any violence that takes place, but the Secretary of State for Health has heard the case that he has put and will be happy to look at that particular issue that he's raised.
Chris Bryant.
When she introduces a UK agricultural policy, because we're out of the common agricultural policy, will the Duke of Westminster still receive £407,000 a year? Will the Duke of Northumberland still receive £475,000 a year? And will the Earl of Iver still receive £915,000 a year from the British taxpayer?
Oh, gentleman seems to know a lot about these ducal matters. Most interesting. I'm fascinated by the reply. Let's hear it. Prime Minister.
When we, one of the tasks that we will have, and the honourable gentleman is right, when we leave the European Union, is to decide what support is provided to agriculture as a result of being outside the common agricultural policy. I can assure him that we are taking the interests of all parts of the United Kingdom into account when we look at that system and what it should be in the future.
Ed Miliband.
It brings
Right honourable gentleman, never knew he was quite that popular. Ed Miliband.
I was going to say, Mr. Speaker, it brings back memories, actually. Can I say to the Prime Minister that as the first foreign leader to meet President Trump, she carries a huge responsibility on behalf not just of this country, but the whole international community in the tone that she sets. Can I ask her to reassure us that she will say to the President that he must abide by and not withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Treaty? And in case it is helpful, can she offer the services of UK scientists to convince the President that climate change is not a hoax invented by the Chinese?
Prime Minister!
Well, I recognise the role that the Right Honourable Gentleman has played in looking at this issue of climate change, and I hope he recognises the commitment that this government has shown to this issue of climate change with the legislation that we've put through and the changes that we have brought about in terms of the energy sector and uses of different forms of energy. The Obama administration obviously signed up to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We have now done that. I would hope that all parties would continue to ensure that that climate change agreement is put into practice.
Order.
Debates that shape the nation, now in your language.